bloody. When you're this good at the game, it's unlikely to ever be solo killed in lane. At a high level, solo kills are usually a result of greed or disrespect towards your opponent. How we'll determine the winner of this series will be based on who achieves their matchup goals the best. Every specific matchup in the game has goals that you can strive for to get ahead of your opponent. For example, let's say that you're playing Kassadin. Meanwhile, the enemy mid laner is hard countering you by locking in Renekton mid. In that lane, your goal wouldn't be to solo kill Renekton, take his tower, or out roam him. Your goal would be to not die and gracefully go down 20 to 30 CS. Renekton needs to shut down Kassadin really hard, or the counter pick won't be worth it. By playing safe and minimizing losses, you could argue that Kassadin is technically winning since he's going to outscale Renekton so hard. So we'll be judging who wins this series by which of the two players achieves their specific matchup goals the best. And with that, let's head into the first game. This first game will feature FAKER on Sylas versus Dopa on his trusted Twisted Fate. This being a ranged versus melee matchup will mean that Dopa will be looking to get a decent lead before the first base by abusing the range advantage. Meanwhile, FAKER wants to preserve his health and try to stay even in CS if possible. He'll also want to set up ganks onto Dopa as he overextends for harass with Sylas' powerful gank setup. To preserve his health, FAKER will want to time his last hits while Dopa is also last hitting. Twisted Fate can't harass very well outside of his auto attacks, so FAKER will be free to move up while Dopa's auto attacks are being used on minions. This matchup becomes quite interesting at level 6 due to Sylas' ability to snag Twisted Fate's ultimate. Having lane control at this point will be critical. Being the first one to move and roam can decide the game, or being able to follow up on the other's roam will also be important. At the start of the lane, FAKER is missing, so Dopa begins auto-attacking the first 3 melee creeps. This is important for Twisted Fate since, as we said, his main form of harass is auto-attacks. On the first wave, the initial 3 melee creeps on both sides usually die at around the same time. But by auto-attacking them preemptively, Dopa frees himself up to land this gold card while FAKER is busy last hitting. And you may be wondering why Dopa doesn't choose to go in for another auto attack on FAKER for both damage and another Klepto proc. This is because Dopa already has a minion advantage and he wants a nice and big slow crash onto FAKER's tower. If he extends for another auto attack here, the caster minions would hit him. The caster creep damage isn't the problem. The problem is that then this minion wave would be winning by an even bigger margin, and this can potentially screw up the timing and size of the later crash. Slow pushing can be a delicate balance, and Dopa will primarily be looking to auto-attack FAKER when he extends into the melee creep range. This would allow him to auto-attack without pulling too many creeps. Besides this early hiccup here where FAKER takes an auto for no reason, both players are going to play this quite standard. Dopa is actively building his slow push, meanwhile FAKER is just last hitting whenever possible. But FAKER will begin changing his game plan quite soon. The usual gank timing for junglers is around 2 minutes and 50 seconds to around 3 minutes. FAKER needs to make sure that Dopa doesn't get a clean crash before then, and that he's level 3 so he has his full combo to follow up on the gank. So he tanks 2 autos to try and thin the wave, and then tanks another gold card combo trying to clear more minions. FAKER then opts to fully commit since Nunu is coming, but Dopa stays calm and plays this very well. He just trades back on FAKER since he's still level 2 and incredibly weak. Then he walks into this corridor because there's no way Nunu can angle his snowball to get there. Now you may be wondering, can't Nunu just punish Dopa for pathing this way by cutting his escape off? Well, unfortunately not. If we switch to FAKER's POV of the game, they have no knowledge of where Skarner is. Nunu can't cut Dopa off in the river since Skarner could be there and he would get 1v2'd. FAKER had the right idea for this lane, but messed up on the execution. He needed to be level 3 for this gank timing, but Nunu clears a bit faster than the average jungler. So when Nunu came early, FAKER tried to make up for it by just brute forcing the gank. This may work on a less skilled player whose first instinct is to run to their tower, but Dopa is smart and knew that running forward would both punish FAKER and escape the gank. Dopa now knows where Nunu is, and has a decently big wave that he can crash, so he can play very aggressively here and look to punish Faker hard under tower. Now, we don't know if he did this on purpose, but knowing Faker, he probably did. He knew Dopa would use Q to finish the wave and then immediately walk into tower range, so he purposely tanked Dopa's Q, which means that when he walked in, he took tower aggro. Unfortunately for Faker, he screwed up the lane too much and this bit of damage isn't enough to stabilize it. The way Faker goes for these last hits with complete disregard for his own health and mana indicates that he's 100% facing after he clears this. Because of this, Dopa hard shoves the wave and gets a clean base off. Faker then teleports back to lane to catch most of the experience from the wave crashing into his tower. So Dopa answers by teleporting back to the lane. This may seem a bit weird since Dopa could have just walked back to lane because it's a cannon wave and at most he'd miss 2, maybe 3 melee creeps and keep his teleport up for later. As we said, for this lane, level 6 and lane control are both super critical. Since they're basically even in experience, missing even 2 or 3 melee creeps can give Faker the level 6 advantage. More importantly though, he'd be giving Faker a lot of time to set up vision and take control of the wave. This could snowball into Faker getting a free ult roam off. So he commits his teleport, and thanks to his superior buy from winning lane early, he's able to have complete lane control for the next few minutes. This lets him get a clean shove on the level 6 wave, while Faker is still level 5 to ult top lane and score a return kill. Faker will try to answer back by shoving the next wave as fast as possible, but only denies Dopa 2 creeps. After this next shove, Dopa also goes for his second recall and we can compare the results. Faker is down 11 CS despite Dopa leaving lane to help his top laner. Not only that, but he did it while outplaying jungle pressure early on and even denying some counter jungling options from Nunu. It's safe to say that Dopa clearly won this lane. Alright, let's now hop into game 2 and see if Faker can get his revenge on Camille against Dopa's Orianna. This matchup functions quite similarly to the previous one. Orianna will abuse her range advantage to harass Camille. Camille will want to preserve her health so that she can be healthy enough to set up ganks. The only major difference in early game plan for this matchup is the fact that Dopa isn't limited to just auto attacks for harass. He can weave Qs in even while last hitting to have a lot more pressure in lane. Dopa really wants a significant advantage in the early game because once Faker hits 6, the amount of pressure that Dopa can exert will be very limited. He won't be able to extend far in lane without Camille just setting up ganks with her ultimate. As the laning phase begins, we see Faker chase down Poppy trying to get some pre-lane harass. The problem with this is that Dopa can zone him a bit from the wave, so Faker ends up missing 1 melee creep worth of experience. This will throw off his level timings during the early levels, which can actually be a big deal. Otherwise, this lane begins quite standard. Once the melee creeps of the first wave are dead, Dopa moves forward to zone Faker until the next wave arrives. This isn't a big deal as Faker isn't really missing any experience at the moment, but it's good for Dopa to do regardless in case Faker were to screw up. As we should know by now, ranged champions want to auto-attack melee champions when they don't have any minions to last hit. Faker is about to take advantage of this with a nice read. He moves forward knowing full well that Dopa has a timing window to auto-attack him. Faker times his W so that when Dopa auto-attacks, he's slowed and in range of these caster creeps. Dopa takes a lot of return damage, and despite being a level down and being melee, Faker actually wins this trade with a really heads-up play. Moments later, Faker makes another really smart play. He sees Dopa use his Q to last hit, and that his own 2 caster creeps are getting quite low. This means that Dopa's auto attacks will be preoccupied and his Q will be down. The only way that he can harass Faker is with W. So Faker moves in and wiggles back and forth, trying to bait out Orianna's W. Dopa doesn't fall for it, but this still gives Faker a fleet footwork proc, which not only heals him, but gets him out of range before Dopa can punish him for it. Now, Faker is required to hit this melee minion, so Dopa begins walking forward so that he can't hit it for free. Unlike Faker though, Dopa doesn't wiggle back and forth correctly, so he gets hit by Faker's W, which last hits the minion as well. It's okay for Orianna to get hit by this sometimes, but if it happens too much, he'll be giving FAKER way too much free sustain. FAKER inevitably gets punished here due to the matchup, but he keeps looking to land his W onto Dopa whenever it's up. Then he just has to wait for the wave to fully crash into him. The cannon creep is a high priority here, so Dopa moves forward to punish the last hit. Once again, FAKER baits Orianna Q by wiggling back and forth. Dopa should have waited to Q FAKER as he auto-attacked the cannon instead. FAKER misses it regardless, but still a mistake from Dopa. So we're back at that 3-minute timing of the game where junglers start to become active on the map, so Dopa concedes pressure to lay down a ward. But this ward is really weird. If we take a look at the start of the game, we see Kennen was not at red buff to leash at 1 minute and 30 seconds, and the enemy bot lane was missing from the lane. Karthus clearly started bot side, and Karthus players tend to just full clear. But even if Karthus decided to try and vertical jungle against a Nunu for some reason, there's no Raptors up. He'd be getting ganked by a level 2 Karthus with just blue buff. What we're saying here is that this ward makes absolutely zero sense, and we're chalking this one up as an autopilot ward, which would be fine had Karthus started red buff. However, this random ward gives FAKER some breathing room to get these 3 CS, then as Dopa gets back into lane, he immediately misses Q again and gets tagged by another W from FAKER. Dopa at this point has no significant damage down, so FAKER is able to fully commit with his hookshot for a clean trade. He then falls back to last hit and dodges yet another Q from Dopa. When FAKER hits level 4 off his next wave, he looks for another W. He actually does a small optimization trick here by using the W while it's still rank 1 and leveling it up mid-cast. This uses the mana cost of the lower rank while doing the damage of the leveled up rank. This works on a lot of abilities in League and is a very useful tip to keep in your back pocket. It will almost always work on abilities that have some form of delayed damage. For example, as Zig's bomb is traveling, you level it up and it'll do more damage. It also works on Camille's E and Q since their damage is a bit delayed, though there really isn't any point in doing so since their mana costs don't change as you rank them up. This is simply to demonstrate that it works on almost all delayed damage abilities, and testing how this works on your specific champion pool can save you a bit of mana every time you level up. Jumping back to the lane, FAKER finishes clearing this wave by landing yet another W onto Dopa. Then he moves into the river, likely to fake a ward placement. There's no need to place an actual ward since we saw Nunu stroll on by to the right side of the map moments earlier, which does make this following face check a bit weird. FAKER is forced to flash away, but this does result in an unintended consequence for Dopa. He's now out of position, so Karthus can come in and zone him from the lane. This forces him to go into his own jungle. Dopa is aware that this will give FAKER a free recall, which will put him very far behind, so he greeds to try and salvage the lane, but Karthus is smart and waits for him to snag an easy first blood. At this point, it's safe to say that FAKER won this lane. You may argue that this was a jungle difference based on the last 30 seconds or so, but Dopa being in this position is his own fault. If he had been higher health and mana at this point, Dopa and Nunu could easily fight their way through Karthus back to mid lane. Then, Dopa and Nunu could set up a freeze together since their 2v2 would be stronger in that case. This would put FAKER incredibly far behind. But Dopa simply got outclassed this lane. He consistently messed up harass by missing a ton of Qs and wasn't even aware of the enemy jungler's pathing. Meanwhile, FAKER made a ton of intelligent decisions to deal with the range disadvantage and landed literally every single sweet spot W. He gets to recall with higher CS in a melee versus ranged matchup, and will now have teleport advantage. That's a complete stomp in our book. This game clearly goes to FAKER.